Rapid fire review. Angry Joe show. What an intro, dude.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another rapid fire review, this time for Grinding Gear Games Path of Exile 2, the early access launch. As with other early access reviews, I've done my best to take into consideration how much of a work in progress this game is. All sorts of things can and have changed since day one, so much of what we are going to discuss is this game's bones. This particular ARPG space has had some rather disappointing launches as of late.
Holy base, dude. See, it's not just me.
We've had some games come out with poor performance.
Let's see, you think everybody in the chat, the comments are mad about Last Epoch not being called the best ARPG ever? No, of course not, because it only happens to fucking me.
Performance and undercooked systems. And famously, Blizzard has cemented itself as an entity that is impossible to underestimate, further sinking into their abyss of minimum viable product mediocrity, tarnishing their once lauded name so badly that I believe they will be used as a bad example for generations.
Holy shit.
With how much I enjoyed Path of Exile 1, I had fairly lofty expectations. Hell,
This guy is based.
a lofty need for Path of Exile 2 to be something that would scratch that itch. Sometimes you just want to do some mindless runs, respec a character from scratch, and burn through all of your gold and materials. See what a new season has in store, come up with your own build, and die from bullshit off-screen with no warning. Fortunately for me, Path of Exile 2 did scratch that itch, especially that part where I died to bullshit from off-screen. What we got here in this early launch was 3 of the 6 chapters of the campaign, 6 of the 12 character classes, and half the total skills that players can use to dip into. We also got much of the endgame map system that you can use to test builds, farm gear, and die to the most horrendous random bullshit you have ever seen in modern video games. The campaign length, as of now, I would say is about 15 to 20 hours, depending on how familiar you are with Passive Exile and this type of game. Seen in modern video games. The campaign length, as of now, I would say is about 15 to 20 hours, depending on how familiar you are with Passive Exile and this type of game. We have the standard medieval dark fantasy villages and manors in the first act, the desert ruins and nomadic tribes in the second, and the mysterious jungle in the third, all with various degrees of demonic possession, grime, and grit, and generously sprinkled with blood and guts absolutely everywhere. This campaign was significantly more challenging than I had expected, but I wouldn't say it's at all insurmountable, even for people new to the genre. But it's a bit of a departure from the norm, since in my opinion, the game designers for this genre have often erred on the side of baby mode when they've been setting difficulty in their games. But not here with Path of Exile 2. And it was nice to have to sit and rethink my build, actually search for and construct items I needed, or explore those optional areas and make sure I got that extra level or permanent stats.
I mean, once you've spent like one day in Endgame, it becomes baby mode, but
The story of the campaign is pretty standard stuff. Our baby character washes up on a shore, we slowly increase in power, we help the needy, we get wrapped up in bigger and bigger conflicts, then ultimately we must be the savior of the lives and souls of everyone in the land. For what we get so far, it's decent enough, but it still isn't, as of now, on the level of presentation of Blizzard. Hopefully, as we get the final 3 chapters in the game...
What did you just say?
On the level of presentation. Ultimately, so far, it's decent enough, but it still isn't, as of now, on the level of presentation of Blizzard.
Dude. No. No way. There's no way. Well, this way, is he talking about cinematics only?
Be the savior of the lives and souls of everyone in the land. Then ultimately we must be the savior of the lives and souls of everyone in the land. For what we get so far, it's decent enough, but it still isn't, as of now, on the conflicts. The campaign is pretty standard stuff. Our baby character washes up on a shore, we slowly increase in power, we help the needy, we get...
Dude, the way the D4 story is presented is like, alright, The power of friendship. We gotta go find this thing. Follow Nayrel for 10 hours. Follow Nayrel for 10 hours. Follow Nayrel for 10 hours. Alright, the power of friendship. The Spiritborn are in the jungle. Mephisto knew about them or something. We don't really know, guys. Mephisto and the Mephisto expansion? No, you can fight his dog. Alright, so now you follow Nayrel for 10 hours. Now you follow Nayrel for 10 hours. Maybe you do a little bit of cooking, as in literal cooking. Play some Cooking Mama, except bad. And then we follow Nayrel for 10 hours, and then they refer to Diablo as devil in Diablo. They don't even refer to Diablo as Diablo in Diablo 4. They refer to him as devil. Did you know that?
Wrapped up in bigger and bigger conflicts, then ultimately we must be the savior of the lives and souls of everyone in the land. For what we get so far, it's decent enough, but it still isn't, as of now, on the level of presentation of Blizzard. Hopefully, as we get the final 3 chapters in the game, the story can get more interesting, and perhaps a bit less paint-by-numbers.
How is giant spaghetti beast monster that's being hauled around and corrupting the land less interesting than finding Mephisto's dog? And the power of friendship with Nayrel for 10 hours.
Basic than it is now. Once you finish the campaign, you have the option to up the difficulty to Cruel, and after that much faster run, you gain access to the Endgame map system. Though it looks complicated, ultimately it's just a set of customizable instances with some set characteristics. The level and difficulty of these maps is mostly up to the player. What keys you use to unlock the maps will change the level of monster, rarity of loot, and even how much seizure-inducing pixel puke is sprayed on your screen. The inclusion of the map system in this early access, for me, is a good sign. While I do believe the campaign is, and absolutely should be worthwhile, for me, the endgame is where I spend the most amount of time in these games, and not to constantly point fingers back at that miserable pile of disappointment made by hacks only concerned with their mobile game whales, but we needed at least a hint of a fleshed out endgame system to separate further from D4. This early access isn't all puppies and putrescence, though. There have been some missteps, some simple fixes, but other things just have quite a few of us scratching our heads on how the hell anyone approved it. Movement or lack of movement in this game is something that took a lot of getting used to. A dodge roll, for most classes, is going to be your main and probably only means of reliable escape. And before its recent change, it wasn't even reliable. The game's focus on skills being accessible to all classes is a wonderful system that allows for incredibly deep customization based on 12 classes worth of skills, support gems, and one of the craziest passive trees in gaming. The problem is, quite a bit of that customization isn't available yet. So some specific builds are going to need that next set of classes to come out before they can be used, at least at high levels. Respecking your character is a simple process, and as of now, it isn't all that expensive to do so. Though when I did it, it did cost twice as much, and I did waste about 1 million gold swapping passives around. The one thing you can't change, though, is your class's Ascendancy. About halfway through the game, you have to make the biggest choice, which of 2 available Ascendancies your character will go through. Don't choose wrong, though, and there are wrong choices here. At least for now, some are bad, and others are worse.
For now?
The one I chose, Blood Witch, was just broken for a few weeks since Life Leech didn't even work. I'm sure balance patches will fix some of the problems here. It just kind of feels bad to be permanently locked in when some of the classes are so much worse than they are.
Yeah, you should be able
Speaking
to
of feel bads, getting the Ascendancies, especially level 3 and 4, is just miserable. Running through floor after floor of miserable trap dodging and annoying, untelegraphed enemy attacks just to have one random thing hit you and remove 4,000 honor for an instant loss is just
it's kind of... I don't understand why they added honor resistance. It's stupid. Like, if you have no honor resistance, something across the room will throw a spear you can barely see at you and do like 1/3 of your honor.
And I did it with a range character, which is easier, and it was still absolutely miserable. Especially tier 4 traps. My heart really goes out to the non-power gamer melee characters trying. They've made some adjustments here already, but it's not enough. You have to be stacking 75% honor resistance just to have a shot.
Stupid.
And bad RNG can still auto-fail you. On one hand, these are optional tests, and they should be challenging. But most of the time it felt
I
like a
wouldn't call 'em
test of
optional.
persistence to get the right RNG, rather than a test of skill or build. The other miserable
Yep.
grind is the inconsistent waystone drop about halfway through the tiers.
2 RNG.
You need these keys even to play the endgame, and the drop rate is horrible. Early on, you can supplement
Hold
with
on,
the
what?
merchant selling waystone drop, test of skill or build. The other miserable grind is the inconsistent waystone drop about halfway through the tiers. You need these keys even to play the endgame, and the drop rate is horrible. Early on, you
Run
can
them
supplement
rare.
with the merchant
Do
selling
map
level 1
bosses. You will never run out.
keys that you can recombine into level 2s and 3s, and maybe 4s if you're rich. But until you get much deeper...
Wait, his inventory is full of tier 15. It's not that bad early on. It's not that bad. People just aren't running them rare.
deeper into the Atlas passive tree to increase drop rates and the rarity of the keys, you can get stuck.
You run them rare. I'm convinced people just skip all the map boss maps. You run them rare. You do map bosses. The map bosses themselves will drop like 5.
Once you truly reach the end, you'll have more keys than you know what to do with. But it feels wrong that the system only feels good right at the very end, and so
I don't think you should I don't think maps should be like rifts where you can just blast to the highest difficulty instantly. I don't mind if there's a little bit of ping-ponging back and forth for a day before you get to your high tier maps. I don't think it should be like rifts where you just blast to the end instantly. Like it's just another layer of progression. You ping pong lower maps for a bit. You work up your Atlas points, you get more Waystone drop chance, you get your Waystone nodes, and then boom, you're sustaining maps and you've progressed.
sucks the entire time getting there. Another reason it feels so good right at the end of the game is you get an absolute ton of loot. During the campaign, though, it's much, much harder to secure gear. The drops aren't great.
Campaign loot is
Upgrading
atrocious.
is way too unreliable, and if you're really unlucky, like OJ was, it can take a long time getting the weapon upgrades some characters need to progress. They've tweaked it some, but it's still tough,
Did you just say unlucky like OJ was?
especially for newer players who may not know the ins and outs of the most obscure Path of Exile loot crafting systems.
Like OJ
Trading
Simpson,
using their
or
website
what?
system feels unfortunately mandatory. Once I hit Act 2 of Cruel, I wasn't wearing a single piece of gear I had personally looted. It just wasn't dropping anything relevant for me. And still now, I am not wearing a single piece of gear that I personally looted. I am also hoping there will be some graphical tweaks, so I will actually be able to see what is about to explode near me. Perhaps the fake,
Yeah, it's bad.
non-damaging explosions of rare mobs and maps won't cover up the very real and very lethal explosions also littering the map. Maybe it's just me, but I'd also like to die less from stuff that's off the screen. Or at least telegraph the enemy cast corpse explosions. Perhaps, maybe, please. And hopefully, the maps from the other 3 unreleased acts will not have the same design philosophy of the maggot lair from Diablo 2. Who the fuck thought that a giant...
I don't think this map is actually that bad. I think this map is actually one of the less egregiously designed ones in the campaign.
cluster
This one's not bad.
of narrow twist...
There's like 2 ways to go. Although if you're playing minions it is a problem, which I guess he is. So.
tunnels would be fun to constantly backtrack through and play hide and seek with a tiny cluster of rare mobs. For a game that followed the blueprints of Diablo 2, you'd think that they'd have learned from the mistakes that Blizzard made and would avoid recreating and then duplicating the most hated portion of that game.
Yeah,
For the new player experience, Path of Exile 2 has quite a few obscure systems. And while they explain them a little better here than they had previously, it still needs quite a bit of work. And it's not really beginner-friendly. Some of these systems that aren't really explained
Finally, somebody says it's not beginner friendly. Thank you.
are important, and a lot of people are going to get stuck.
I mean, this guy has some good takes.
Outside of that,
Some not so good takes, which I assume stem from not being experienced with the game, but
I think most of the issues are smaller tweaks I
it's like his general overview takes are pretty good.
expect to get adjusted in the coming months. More customizations and builds will naturally come with more classes, their skills, and maybe support gems. More Ascendancies also mean more endgame customization. When PoE 2 officially launches, it will be free to play, though the early access period is only for supporters, and that'll cost you $30 US. That'll get you almost all of the necessary quality of life stash tabs, though unless you plan to take up the game for multiple seasons, none of it's really necessary. And pretty much all of the previous microtransactions will carry over from the first game. And as with all live service games, we're going to be keeping a pretty close eye on the microtransactions here. So far, they've been mostly reasonable, but you gotta keep an eye on things like this. I'm going to give the early access period of Path of Exile 2 an 8 out of 10.
I thought he was going to say a Path of Exile 2 out of 10.
Even with the current early access problems, the foundation here is clearly solid. And I think the future is bright for Path of Exile 2. I've got more than 120 hours in for just $30, and as new classes are introduced and more fixes and tweaks are made in the game, I'm excited for the opportunity to check back in. Thanks so much for watching this rapid fire review. We have a ton of end-of-year content coming for you.
He is pretty spot on, except for when he got into specific game mechanics is when he faltered. I mean, look, even in this video, 3 tier 15s right here. I mean, I know he's deep in the... Oh, there's 4 maps here, actually. Like, bro, just do the same thing early on. Like, you're gonna drop a bit less before you get your waystone nodes on the tree, but I think that's fine. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, overall, very solid review. This is probably the best review of the game I've seen from, like, a non... PoE main.